Oh, there he is. There's Ryan. Just in time, man.
Working.
Okay, let's see if we can avoid the airport from last time. How you doing? How's your sound, Ryan?
Hear you well. Do you hear me?
Yep. You sound
All right.
fine. We're good. Okay, welcome to this month's, this is September, the September edition of the Online XMod Pro user group. And we are happy that you have joined us, either in live form or in recorded form. We have this session once a month, and we have it at the end of the month, every fourth Thursday of every month. So just mark it on your calendars now, and it'll happen at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and I think that's 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. GMT. 7 p.m. GMT, I think. So be sure to join us and put us on your calendar for future months. Every month we will be discussing various aspects of not just XMod Pro, but we also dive into DNN in general sometimes, and figure out how to leverage XMod Pro to please yourself and especially your clients as you're building websites and solutions for them. And each time we'll have one or two presenters discussing various aspects, either how to do something, showing off something they've built, or some technique that they use when using XMod Pro. And you're going to get a lot out of it. You're going to get a lot out of it today. Today we've got Patrick Ryan, who is going to be discussing or demystifying, really, the jQueryReady tag in XMod Pro. And I'm also going to be covering a couple of things, just things that don't get talked about too much. You might have read about them, but we're going to talk about how to connect to an external SQL database and also how to customize the pager. Some very practical things that people need often, so we'll be talking about that as well. And we have with us Melinda, who is going to be handling your chats and your questions, and so get those on there, and she'll be responding to you and she'll make sure that we see them so that we can respond and answer to them. Also, of course, we got Patrick Ryan, who is the head of Reflect Media Group, who you might recognize from previous user groups, from the community on DNNDev.com, and also from his add-ons for XMod Pro. So check him out at the store. And we also have Ryan Moore of More Creative, a longtime XMod Pro community member, and someone who also does XMod Pro development for lots of clients as part of his day job. And they also have quite a few add-ons on the store for you to check out too. So there's a good ecosystem around XMod Pro, and we've got some great people joining us on the panel today. If you would like to present, if you'd like to join our panel live, if you have a technique or a site you want to show off, or just questions and you want to be on TV, well, on Google TV at least, then be sure and let me know. You can reach me at kford@DNNDev.com, or you can also get a hold of Melinda at mford@DNNDev.com, or just post on our Google Plus page or anywhere else you can find us, and we'll make sure we get you on. And if you just have an idea or a topic for submission for our user group, let me know that too, because we're always looking for good ideas. Okay, without further ado, let's move on, and I will introduce Patrick Ryan, who's going to be demystifying the jQueryReady tag in XMod Pro. Take it away, Patrick.
Oh, am I first?
You are first.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. This is Patrick Ryan here with Reflect Media Group. And, well, okay, let me close some windows and jump over here and share my screen with you guys. Someone could let me know if my screen can be seen.
Let me see your screen.
Big Manage Orders heading text there. Awesome. Okay. All right, everyone. So what I'm going to talk about today is jQueryReady and just some simple functionality on how I utilize this. I put this thing together in about 30 to 45 minutes or so, and here's a demo. Here's what it does. I've got some fake orders here. And instead of using the list and the detailed view, I've incorporated jQuery throughout all of it. So we can view order details, like so. And we've got these checkboxes here where we can mark an order as fulfilled. Take note of this text here. We can mark that as fulfilled, or even go through and delete selected items. Toggle all. We can mark them all as fulfilled or delete all of those items. Now, I'm going to do my best here to demystify jQueryReady, how I utilize it, and how I've kind of put together this demonstration. Let me kind of put my data back the same way that it was. I'm not technically deleting them, but I can show you how.
Patrick, before you get started, can you talk about the jQueryReady tag, what it is? And
Absolutely. I'm about to do that right now.
Okay.
So what is jQueryReady? Let me show you behind the scenes. When you put a jQueryReady block inside of a form or a template, this is what it creates. If you look at the source, you've got a script tag, you've got a function, which is technically, this is called an immediately invoked function expression. And what that means is anything inside of the jQueryReady tag is going to be executed as soon as that function loads. And inside of that, it also creates a document ready function, which puts a condition on that. Let me close the box over here. I've got some noises coming up. Sorry, guys. So this by itself, you can see the opening function tag there, and it closes right here. All that really is a way to organize your JavaScript or jQuery code within a boundary, within a box. And this, whatever's inside of this wrapping right here, is executed immediately. So inside of that, what jQueryReady does for you is puts a document ready function. Now, what that means is nothing's going to happen until the DOM is ready, which is the document object model. Basically, to simplify that, when the page is ready, when the content is loaded, we're not going to do anything until that content is actually loaded. So let's just kind of pry this thing apart and talk about how this is built and what this does. So I've got two tables. I've got a order table and an order details table, and just obviously some dummy information within it. I am using Bootstrap on this site. If you're not familiar with Bootstrap, I highly recommend it. It is a CSS and JavaScript library or a framework, basically, for quickly prototyping sites and having all kinds of things like rows and columns set for you, mobile responsive, and so on. If you're familiar with it, you'll recognize this. I've got a row, and I'm starting with a column, and it's set to 6, and the grid system is 12. So on the left, I've got my orders, and on the right, I've got my order details. You can see there's the column for that. So orders on the left, order details on the right. Now, here's my template, which is very, very simple. Select order ID, first name, last name, date created, fulfilled from that table. And I've got a header template here where I've got a class called order controls. Those are those buttons that you saw, the mark is fulfilled and delete selected. And I've got a style attribute with opacity to 0. That's just inline CSS. And also, when I'm showing you guys this, a lot of this stuff would be better organized, but for the purpose of this demo, I've put it in line. So we've basically saying, don't show this, hide this. So we've got these two buttons, one with an ID of bulk fulfill, and the other with an ID of bulk delete. And then I've got the opening of my table, and inside of my table, I've put an input checkbox with a class of order checkbox bulk and ID of select all, which I don't even think I used that ID, but there it is. And inside of my item template, some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not be. The last demonstration I used filtering through to find an item with a class. In this, I'm using data attributes. So, for example, this checkbox right here, 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 that is this checkbox right here. And you can see that I've added a data attribute. Here's data hyphen order ID, and I'm using the field token for order ID. Data hyphen portal ID, and I'm using the the function from XMod Pro to grab the current portal ID. And the rest of the information is pretty basic. And I've got a button here. So now keep in mind, the traditional way with XMod Pro would be using a list and detail template. But I didn't do that, so I'm going to show you how I did this with jQuery and using jQueryReady. So I've got a data-order ID again, and same with the portal ID and the details button. So what I've got down here is, for demo, I've kind of broke this out into, here's a jQueryReady block, here's another one, and here's another one. They don't all have to be separated like that. Again, it depends on how you want to organize your code that best works for you. I'm doing several AJAX calls to feeds, so if I were to refactor this, I would go through and I'd create a function, a global function for a feed, and deal with it in that manner. But I'm going to explain every bit of this. So first of all, how do we get these order details? So I've got on that button, it's got a class called trigger details. And inside of jQueryReady, so explain jQueryReady again, we're going to run some JavaScript, but not until the page is ready. And once it's ready, if this guy is clicked, if that trigger details element is clicked, and that's this details button right here, we're going to perform a function. We're going to do something. And the first thing I want to know is, well, which one was clicked? Because there's a lot of these trigger details classes if there's lots of orders. That's not a unique ID, that's just a class name. So I'm saying var el, for short for element, is this. This is a jQueryReady object. This basically takes this whole element right here and wraps it in a jQuery object so I can do stuff with it. Now, the reason I'm saying var el equals this is because I'm going to use this more than once. This is just a performance solution here. So what it's doing is I'm caching this object, right? So the EL stands for whatever details link was clicked. Now, I need that order ID. I need to know what that order ID is. So I've got a parseInt function, and I'm saying this, using the EL, dot data, and that is these data attributes, and I want the value of order ID. The parseInt is being explicit. This is good practice. This is saying, because part of the issue with JavaScript is it's loosely interpreted when you create variables. I want to tell this that this is not text, this is an integer value. So turn whatever the heck this value is and make sure that it's set as an integer. I'm doing the same thing for portal ID. What you'll learn is when you're triggering a feed requires the portal ID. So I'm saying var PID equals the parseInt el.data, find the portal ID and give it to me. And I also want to know, what am I going to do with these details? Where am I going to put them? Well, I've got that other column here with an ID of order details. And so I'm saying details is that object. So now I have incorporated this whole object inside of this variable name. And what we have next is the actual AJAX function. So I'm using AJAX, and I'm saying we're gonna post something. We're gonna create a post, and we're gonna send it to this URL, and that is the URL of feed.aspx with XMod Pro. The data type is HTML, and we need to send data to this feed. Well, we need XFD, which stands for the feed name, and that is, in this case, RMG_demo order detail. The portal ID and the order ID. And once we execute that feed, we're going to call a success function, which brings back the data. Now, what that means is, remember, if you watched the last user group, we talked about these feeds, and all that feed is a template outside of the skin, or a template outside of the box. So it's got a list data source, it's going to perform a query, it's got an item template, and basically everything that feed returns is going to be incorporated into this data object. And then we're going to say, on that details element, I want you to put the data inside of it. So details.html data. I could replace this with some text, and it would replace it with that. But we want to replace it with the data that's actually returned. All right, so if we look at that, we actually look at that feed. Order detail. We've got a select product from the order detail table where order ID equals parameter order ID. Well, I have to give that parameter value. So the parameter name order ID, the value is form, which is for a form post, OID. And here's my item template. So we can go back and we can look at that AJAX function again, and we can see OID, which was sent by the form. All right. So once we grab those details, we're going to find this element called details, and we're going to put the data in it. And that's how you get this functionality right here. And the cool thing about it, and why I like doing it this way, is it's very fast, and it's only affecting the elements that we're utilizing. So when you're using the AJAX functions in XMod Pro, it has to do a little bit more heavy lifting. So when you get to this point and learn how to use this, you can leverage this feature extensively. All right, so that's how we got the order details, and we've got that wrapped in jQueryReady. Here's another jQueryReady block. All those checkboxes have a class called order-checkbox, and I want to perform a function anytime one of those are clicked. It doesn't matter if it's checked or unchecked, I need to check something. So I created a variable called at least one, and that basically returns true or false. And it looks for all of the items that have the class order-checkbox that are clicked, and it asks for the length. Is the length greater than 0? Is there at least one checkbox checked? If that's true, if at least one equals true, then we're going to find our order controls div, and we're going to use jQuery to change the CSS property of opacity to 1. If it's false, we're going to change it to opacity of 0. So up here, we have our order controls div with opacity of 0. And you can see that if at least one is checked, it makes them show up. If not, they go away. So that's all that does. That just triggers the opacity change on this element right here. So now, let's say someone clicks, or we click this mark as fulfilled button. Well, I've given this button an ID of bulk_fulfill. Let's go down to another jQueryReady block. So here's the fulfill one. So when this button is clicked, we're going to perform a function. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the jQuery each function. We're going to say, I want you to find all of the order checkboxes that are checked, and for each one of them, I want you to do something. So this is going to loop through each one of them. So the first thing we do is we cache the object itself. Well, this checkbox is equal to EL. I want to know the row that it's associated with, just the table row. So we're going to say el.closest_tr. Closest is just another jQuery function that finds the closest parent element. So we've got the tr for the table row. We need that order ID. I've done the same exact thing with the data attribute. So we're saying data order ID, and portal ID is data portal ID. And we're calling another feed. And this feed operates in the same manner as the other, but it's for fulfilling an order. So we can go look at that feed. And now here's where I want to caution you. When you are using feeds, remember that by nature feeds are public. And so I've identified a few roles in here as administrators. I don't want anyone managing my orders and firing off all kinds of post requests to this feed and messing up my data. So I want to make sure that it's only able to be triggered by administrators. So the list data source on this is update my order table and set fulfill equals 1, where order ID equals parameter order ID. I'll explain why I've got this select 1 on the end of this in a second. But here's the parameter, the form OID, and the select 1 is simply because by nature feeds return data. Well, we're using a feed to trigger a stored procedure that that's just an update function. We need to return something. So I'm just using select one to return something, or else you'll get an error. But most of the time, if I were really using this, I would actually be validating that the function performed properly on the server and returning data from that and dealing with the data from that standpoint. So that's all this thing does here. So let's see it in action again. So let's check this one, and mark those three as fulfilled. So you can see that it quickly cycles through each one of those and does exactly that. All right, and our last one is to bulk delete these, and that's my jQueryReady block down here. When the bulk delete button is clicked, I'm going to do the same thing as I did for the fulfill, but I'm calling a different feed for this. And all that feed does is, well, it doesn't do anything. It just does select one, because I wanted to be able to show you this without having to go back in and add data over and over again. So what I've done is in the success function, I've said order row.remove, which just from a user experience standpoint, it has nothing to do with the data itself. It's just using jQuery to remove that table row out from the DOM, out from the document object model, the page. And let's see that in action again. So we want to delete this one and this one. We can delete selected, and they're gone. Or we can toggle all of these, and they're gone. I can refresh this page, and our data's back. And I'm actually about done, guys, so if you can think of any questions, feel free. Oh,
yeah,
I see one in there.
We've got a few.
Okay, great. Let me read through these.
So actually,
two.
yeah, right. Actually, Damien was first on the list, so let's take care of Damien first. Damien asks, is it possible to force one jQueryReady tag to be run before another one on the same page?
Well, yes, but it depends on what you've got in them. These are going to load on the page in the order that you put them. So if you've got two jQueryReady tags and you've got one on top of the other, it's gonna perform those in order. However, if one is not ready or one's not done, this gets into non-blocking situations and stuff like that. If you've got one of them that takes 20 minutes to perform, the other one is going to run as soon as it can, unless there's something in your actual code that's preventing anything else from functioning. I hope that makes sense, but that'll take a much more detailed answer to try to explain how that works.
Yeah, so because JavaScript is executed synchronously on the client, if you had some JavaScript in there that wasn't loaded asynchronously, then it would actually block the page from finishing up, because that JavaScript would have to be executed, and it might take 20 minutes, like you said. Is that what you're getting at?
And now, just so everyone knows, what I typically do is I will create my own functions, and a function itself doesn't run unless you call it. So what I typically do is I use jQueryReady just to order the sequence of my functions being triggered, when, how, and why. So once and what this comes down to is not necessarily an XMod Pro question. I would encourage everyone to study JavaScript, study jQuery, learn and understand what these expressions mean. Like we talked about, this script tag, this function, document ready function, because all of this can be learned just by learning jQuery. What the jQueryReady tag just saves us some typing, really. I mean, ultimately, it's easy to organize it within your code, and you can quickly create functions with it without all kinds of extra stuff, and without having to use extra script blocks and things like that. And it's easy to incorporate your XMod Pro data within them if you use them in line in places like that. What was the other question? We've got one from Ryan. CSS opacity, isn't it still there and clickable? It is. And if this were serious, if this were a real situation, like I could hide these, I could make the opacity 0, but I could still trigger a click on that using my own JavaScript in like the console. But if this were for real, I would disable that button. and I would do more on the server side to protect data. So that's, you always need to do that server side. You need to validate everything that you're doing.
Isn't it, though, that if you did display none instead of CSS visibility, that it would not only not be there visible, but it's even not clickable at that point because it's removed from the
The only reason I did it like this is because I didn't want this to be jumping up and down every time I clicked it. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's the only reason I did that, actually, Ryan.
We have another.
I was also going to jump in with another point about these. In different XMod Pro training sessions, the item that Patrick added to his table here of these checkboxes so that you can activate something or select something and do actions on them is a pretty frequently requested kind of item. And I just wanted to point out some of the differences of what Patrick built here and how important these are versus one of the other ways that you can do something similar with XMod Pro where you use custom commands. And you might use like an XMod command image, and you can use the checkbox icon, or an XMod command link or something like that. And although those fire off immediately, so that you can have something where you're turning on a row and making it active, or click it again and make it inactive, it's really easy to do those, but they fire one at a time, one per row. So if you click one, it does that one. You click the other one, it does that one. And when people have wanted to have, like Patrick's done here, a check at the very top of the whole thing to do one action across all of the items checked, this is the best way to do that, and it's a really elegant explanation of how to do that. So in the future, when I'm asked, I'll be sure to point out to people one at a time. Do it this way with the XMod command image. That's my favorite one. And then I use the image that's part of the icon set out of DNN 6 and 7 that is a checkbox. But if you want anything more where you're doing something more complex, this is a really elegant way to do it. And I'll point them to this video to glean what they can from it.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, good. We have another question from Stefan, and he asks, same question as last time, how do you debug this?
Good question.
I will show you my favorite way to deal with this. In matter of fact, I do this every single time, and I go down to the very basics. So what I'm going to do is I'll comment this Ajax call out real quick, where it is completely inactive. And I do things 1, 2, 3, ABC, right? So the first thing I did with this trigger details, well, the first thing I do is I'll say console log clicked, right? So I just want to make sure that, shoot, I've identified the right element. So I'll use inspect, and I'll open my console here. And now if I click details, it's going to say clicked. You can see it down there in the console log. And the same thing. So now that I know that I'm actually clicking that element, I can get rid of that. That's tested. Well, I can console log the element. And now I'm clicking, and there it is. There's the actual jQuery object, which you can drill down and get into the nitty-gritty of this thing. Those are some pretty basics, but console log is my friend. And same thing with the order ID. Well, am I getting the right order ID? Am I getting the right portal ID? Am I getting the right details block? And once I'm able to do that, then when we get down here to debugging the actual Ajax call, you can use network tap, and I'll show you that in just a second. Let's try to break this thing by changing portal ID to test, which that's not going to do. Now, let me do something different. We got a typo there on XMod Pro feed needs that portal ID. Did I do? forgot something. There it is. My page would load. Okay. So now we're going to have an error. Let's click on one of these. Okay, and now here's something that's irritating, right? So we said a feed with the name RMG demo order detail was not found, and you'll go into your feeds and you'll look at every single letter here and you'll say, you're lying to me. That thing is there, and I know it's there. And I can go into the network tab here and I can say, oh, here's where that feed was actually called, and I can look down here and look at the response. I can see a full error of the response, and you can look at the actual headers. I can scroll down here and say, oh, here's the data that I sent to the feed. Well, it's actually true that feed was not found because it doesn't know what portal ID to find it in, right? So I can see my typo here, and that's another way to debug these things. And that's why I use console log as I'm putting these things together a piece at a time. I want to make sure that I am returning the proper element, I am returning the proper order ID, the proper portal ID, before I even use this whatsoever. So I can fix my little typo here. And let's say, you know, I've got this success function that's taking the details of that order and dropping it into that details div. Well, if you're having trouble with that, you can console log the data that's returned. Now, we're going to see in the console the actual data that's returned. And like I said, you know, that data is everything that's in that feed. You know, the header template, the item template, and the footer template. So now I know that I'm getting the proper data, and all it comes down to at that point is jQuery. You can, you know, certainly use debugger tools with jQuery. That gets a little more advanced, and that's where you can step through your actual functions and watch them literally step by step. But that is definitely a video all in itself. Okay, any other questions?
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute my microphone.
That's all right.
Damien's back. He says, it seems like the last set of examples serves to give an alternative to implementing similar functionality in a web service. Is performance comparable between these two methods?
Okay, well, you know, when you look at what a feed is, when you use a feed in this manner, I mean, it's a web service in itself. And yes, if you've got a lot of public data and you want to build your own API or you want to build your own web service, you know, more power to you, definitely. But like in this particular case, I'm on an administrative page, and I can utilize feeds and my own custom stored procedures certainly much faster than actually creating my own web service and dealing with it from, you know, actually writing code to handle that web service. But it just depends on what you're doing. You know, feeds can be dangerous. You do have to be careful with them. You do have to make sure that the view roles are defined so that you know who can deal with this data or whatever that might be. You could get into more advanced stuff and send, you know, and set up some kind of double encryption, some weird decoding function that you've got. I have no idea what that is. But for safe stuff that's visible to the public, use it. It's fast, it's efficient, and it's user-friendly. For important stuff that is crucial to your site, protect it. Protect it with view roles and protect it with your server-side validation on whatever's actually happening. But you know, like I said, if you have the knowledge to create web services and the knowledge to create your own web API and stuff like that, then I would leverage both. I would leverage using feeds for certain things and using your own web service for other things, depending on what needs to be secured and what doesn't.
Yeah, let me just jump in there for a second. In my experience, the performance is about roughly the same. There is probably a slight overhead in that the feeds might have a page load, but it's so minimal that the amount of overhead you might get from using a feed versus a web service call is virtually non-existent. Now, if you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of requests at a time, that might show some degradation in performance, but I think your performance issues in that case would be more because of your server not being able to handle that many requests in such a short period of time, rather than whether or not you're using a feed or a web API. But Patrick makes a good point in that one of the reasons behind XMod Pro is that you don't have to build out all of the infrastructure in order to make something work. Now, if you have a set of web APIs already built, that's great. You were able to use XMod Pro's feeds immediately without any extra work to support them. And they already have built-in security in the form of DNN roles. So that's stuff that you would normally have to build if you're doing your own web APIs. Now, the .NET Nuke web API implementation gives you that, but of course, XMod Pro has had that ability for quite a while now. And it just really depends on how you want to go. In some cases, you're not going to want to use XMod Pro for the back end. You're going to want to use something that you built yourself. In other cases, you're going to want to use XMod Pro because it's quick, or you're going to use a mixture, as Patrick said, of XMod Pro on the front end and then your web API on the back end. So basically XMod Pro is meant to be a tool to be used and leveraged wherever you can get the most bang for your buck.
I've got one addition to that I just thought of. One way that you can utilize both, you can actually trigger your own web service in part of the functionality, and then use a feed to query data results if you need to pull results from that. So why I love feeds in that manner is you have all of the XMod Pro functionality to generate your data, your select and your case statements, your tokens for user IDs or first name or last name and portal and all those cool functionality that's already in there. Or else if you use just a web service, you've got to construct all that stuff and return it back to the client. So you can use a web service to deal with the actual data in the database, and then you can use a feed to trigger and get the query and then manipulate the actual results with your item template.
Okay, good. All right, I think that does it for our questions for your part of the session, Patrick. Thank you very much. It was enlightening and instructive, as always, and we're looking forward to what you have for us next month.
Thank you.
Okay, now mine is not nearly as interesting probably as Patrick's presentation. I thought I would just cover something that is more mundane, but because it's mundane, it's something you probably use often, and that is the lowly pager tag. We actually get a lot of questions on how do I change the page size of the results that I'm returning? How do I customize the look of my pager? So I just thought I would go through it, and for recording and posterity's sake, people will be able to refer to this video in the future. Of course, if you have any questions, be sure to. Oh, hang on. Damien's got another question before I continue. Will it be possible in the future to add dynamic fields to the header and footer templates in feeds? By dynamic fields, Damien, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Do you actually mean data, or do you mean something like a URL parameter value or a portal ID, one of those types of tokens? Can you respond, maybe? No? Okay. Well, we'll wait for Damien's response. Basically, we can't have dynamic fields in headers and footers because there's no data there in general. So you can't have field tokens, for instance, but you can use other tokens like URL parameter. You can put in, well, in feeds you can't put in like an add button, but you can put in any of the other tokens that give you environmental information. So I hope that answers your question, Damien. If not, just go ahead and ask us again or offline. Okay, moving on. Let me share my screen, and we'll get going on the lowly pager and how to customize that to make it look better. Let's see. I want to do choosing a screen here for what to share. And I think it's going to be this one. All right. Okay, so can you all see that, Patrick? Yeah, Damien, data won't be possible there because there is no data to present in the header or the footer. Okay, so you see my screen here. Let me go ahead and make some changes. What we have is, actually I want to go with just the basics. And shoot, my website needs to kind of boot up here again, my local dev site. So bear with me. Hi Todd, how you doing? You have to unmute you here. And make sure you get a chance to chime in here. No? Okay. I'll continue on. I think my site is up and running now. So basically, this is not your standard ordinary pager that you would see. Normally, if you build something from scratch, let's just take this off for a second. Or using the template builder in XMod Pro, then it's going to look something like this by default. So you've got a set of links here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, next, and it'll also have the previous page link as well. And that works. It's functional. It's really not designed to give you something beautiful out of the box because every website is different. So it's designed just to kind of be there to provide you the functionality and let you customize things. So there are a lot of properties that the pager provides to you in order to customize this, and I'll just step through these really quickly. Let's paste that back in. The first, of course, is the page size. If we set this to 5, then we're going to have 5 results per page, and that's pretty self-explanatory. One thing you do want to pay attention to when you're using the pager is this use paging equals true. If you set that to false, then there is no pager will ever show up because it's just going to list all of your results in one big page load. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But once you have use paging equals true, just add the pager tag, set page size equal to 5 or whatever page size you want, and it'll accommodate from there. You can also specify the number of page buttons that you want to show up between your first and last and previous and next links. So if we change this to, say, 5 buttons and we reload, then we're going to see that it's minimized those page buttons. So now we just have 5 numbered buttons between our first, next, last, and previous. Next are two here, actually. Show first and last, and show previous next, which I don't have in here. So the show first and last will tell XMod Pro to actually display that first button and last page button. Normally it's false by default, as you saw, but setting this to true will display those. And the show previous next is false by default. It's true by default. So if you actually want to turn those off, you can do that by setting it to false. So let's see what happens now. Now we just have first and last. There is no previous and next links. Next up are really where we get to the heart of the styling of our pager, and that's here. This is a basic set of the CSS classes that or the properties you can use to set classes on each of the individual elements in your pager. Let me just duplicate this tab here so we can look at what we're talking about. So the first thing is the PageNum CSS class. Those classes that you add there are going to be applied to these links right here in the middle, the 3 through 7, and the 5, which is the current page that we're on right now. The first last CSS class, of course, is going to apply to the first and last buttons, so they can be different if you want them to be more pronounced. Then you, of course, likewise, you have the previous next CSS class, and you'll notice that I have multiple classes here. If you want multiple classes, just separate them by a space like you would do in regular CSS or in regular style properties of an HTML tag. And then we have the current page CSS class, and that is what is styling this right here. Now, normally, if we don't have the styling that I've implemented, you're going to see like 5 would just be simply a text number 5. But we've decided, because we've styled everything else, we're going to say that we're going to disable that, or make it look disabled so that you can't click on it. And that's what we've done there. Now let's just talk a bit about what happens in the middle. This is an optional item that you can add to your pager. This gives you some flexibility in terms of the layout of your pager. Not a lot of people use this. I'm not sure that a lot of people are aware of it, so I wanted to point this out. You don't have to have this, but if you do, XMod Pro gives you the ability to add your own HTML and also CSS to lay out your pager in whatever manner you see fit. It also gives you some extra information. So if I were to remove this and then save it, and we go over to this page, we'll just reload it. Sorry, we'll do this and then reload it. Now you'll notice all I have are the pager buttons and nothing else. What I removed was this part here in the middle, and that is this custom layout that we've designed. And all I did was create a label, plain text called page, and then I used one of these special tokens that XMod Pro provides you. This one's called page number, and that gives you the number of the current page that the user is on. Page count, likewise, will give you the total number of pages that are returned as part of your list data source. And then the pager token here will be used to actually place that whole bunch of buttons that make up the pager. So if we go ahead and save this with that layout in there, and then we reload our page over here, we will see that we have the page 1 of 202. And that essentially is a pager. Now, if you want to look briefly, the rest is all just CSS, smoke and mirrors stuff. If you want to take a look at what that CSS looks like, I have, you'll notice that I'm using several CSS classes. I have a pager links and a gradient button.
Stefan was saying you couldn't see your screen.
Really?
Just make sure you're sharing it.
Okay. Stefan, can you see me now? Just type in the chat window. That would be awful. Looks like I'm showing my screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Patrick sees it.
Okay. Patrick sees it. All right. Hopefully it will come back for you, Stefan.
Sorry.
So I have set up these classes, CSS classes. They're not defined in my template, though I could if I wanted to. The best practice is to put it in your skin CSS class or in your site CSS class. So what I've done is I've actually put them in the style sheet for the site as a whole, and I'll show you those. Now you can go. There are a lot of sites out there where you can go to get some of these settings just automatically generated for you. So there's no magic here, but this is it. I went to one of those sites and said, "Hey, I want some green gradient buttons," and then I started playing around with the numbers and had it generate this information for me. So here's my gradient button, and that is a lot of CSS stuff, but it covers basically every browser you can imagine. Most of this probably is not as necessary as it used to be. For instance, this is covering Firefox 3.6, very old. But there are some items in here like IE 10 Plus, and hopefully eventually we can get rid of all of these filters for IE, and people will hopefully just stop using them. We can hope. And it's using a box shadow, but the background here is where you're getting all of your gradients. These are the special CSS3 properties that give you gradients, and everything else is pretty much standard CSS. I can provide this to anybody who wants it, and you maybe can just change the colors if you like the look. For whatever site you need to use, just let me know, and I can give you that information. One other thing, I just want to give you a little expert experience-based tip. If you use new versions of .NET Nuke and you install something new, you'll notice something, at least for me, it's very annoying, and that is when you're in edit mode everything dims out when your mouse is not directly over whatever you happen to be working on. So if I'm to load this now, it's dimmed out. It just drives me crazy. I assume that there's some good reason for it, but I've never figured it out. So if it bothers you as much as it bothers me, just paste this stuff into your style sheet. It's the .dnn edit state, .dnn module, and then just set the opacity to 1. And that way it will be nice and clear all the time, like it used to be, regardless of where your mouse is. So that is it. If you have any questions, let me know. I was going to cover some other stuff, but we're getting close to the end of the time, so we won't cover that. But we do have time for questions, maybe some feedback, ideas you'd like to see. Just type into the Q&A box or into the group chat if you have any questions you'd like us to answer. How was that, Patrick? Did I do good?
Awesome.
You know, the Google Hangout approach is kind of difficult. It's more difficult than speaking in front of a live audience because you don't get the kind of feedback that you normally get from an audience. And you have no idea if what you're saying makes any sense, or if people think you're boring, if you're talking too slow, too fast, too loud, too soft. So feedback is always good in these kinds of things. And we welcome any kind of either chat-based feedback or getting online and talking to us and asking us questions.
I see a question.
Okay. Where is it?
Damien, is it possible to do paging of data at the SQL level, or does the pager do this already by default?
The pager does it by default, but yes, you can do it at the SQL level too. It just requires a little bit more setup, and actually there's something built into the pager. Let me see if I can find it now. You know, XMod Pro has gotten so big that sometimes I forget where everything is. There are just too many features to deal with. But there's some information about infinite paging, I call it, and that basically allows you to plug in your database side paging into XMod Pro, and it will, using Ajax, it will pull stuff from the database and just append it to your list. But you don't have to do that. You can, I think, if you're going to use database-based paging, then I would use the new Hyperlink pager that XMod Pro has. And what that's going to do is it's going to pass the page number, the current record, and that kind of information to your database, and then it will be up to your database to do the paging. A lot of times, it really depends on what what's most beneficial for the particular use case that you have in mind. So we provide both. And the benefit of using the hyperlink paging is that you get SEO out of it. You don't have a JavaScript-based postbacks as a result. So, yeah, if you want to do it on the database, I would have you look into the hyperlink pager that is new to, I think, 4.5, 4.6, one of those. Does that answer your question, Damien? Okay. I will take that silence as a yes, that was awesome answer. Okay, let's see, I see Damien has a use case. This was back in the previous question that he'd asked about the feeds. Damien says, well, first of all, let's select Damien's last question. And for those of you who are watching on video, just scroll back a few minutes, and you'll get to the question about Damien's question about paging on the SQL level. Next up is Damien's question on he says he has a use case where a field which is the same throughout the data set, such as order number on a set of order item data, so the value of the field for the first or last row would work. In a lot of cases, you're going to probably be passing that in maybe either via post or via URL parameter, and then you can still use that in those cases. But in those cases, you're best off. I mean, in regular XMod Pro templates, you would probably use multiple templates in order to get that information and have it displayed and stay there. And then you would just use the template that changes. You would hook that into a feed. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay. And Damien says he doesn't recall seeing the information about the infinite pager, I assume. If you look, first of all, there are two things that we talked about. That is the hyperlink pager, which you can find in the pager topic in the help file. And I can show you, share my screen and show you that. Yeah, I did. Let me share my help file here. So you can find the hyperlink bit here in the pager topic of the help file. And if you scroll down, you'll see the search value parameter name. That is part of it. The sort column parameter name and the sort order parameter name. These are things that are going to be passed as part of your URL that are going to be passed to your database. So your list data source is going to need to pull those values from the URL like you normally would with any URL parameter. So you might have something like, let me switch my screens again. So let me just get back to our XMod Pro editor here. So you might have something like in your list data source. This is not going to work obviously because it's not set up for it, but it would look something akin to parameter name equals sort call, we'll call it. And the value is going to be a URL token, and we'll call it SC, and the data type. You can, it's always best to try to pass in numbers rather than text. So what I like to do is I will name my columns based on with a number, so I'm only passing a number. That allows me to do a data type of int32. That further minimizes any. We parameterize our queries anyway, so you're pretty much protected. But this further protects you from SQL injection attacks if you can set your sort up this way. It just minimizes the attack space, the attack surface that you're presenting to someone. So that would be something you would do. You would use. So basically, this SC is what you're going to. Oh, and I got to switch back. This is not very convenient. But the properties on the search value parameter and the sort column parameter name and sort order parameter name, those are the ones that are going to be passed for you by the pager in through your URL. And just to switch back to the help file. The other one you're going to want to deal with, this is the most important one, obviously, is the type. This is a new property that was added in or XMod Pro 4.5, and so you just set the pager type to hyperlink, and then that will turn it into this. Instead of a JavaScript postback, it's going to be an actual hyperlink. So the one thing you want to keep in mind, other than setting up what we just talked about correctly, the other thing you need to keep in mind is that these are hyperlinks. So every time someone clicks on it, it's going to post back and retrieve what it thinks is a new page. And that could have repercussions for any other modules on your page. So you do want to keep that in mind when you implement something like this, because those modules will think it's a new page load. So you're not gonna keep any existing information between postbacks because of that. That's just one of the pitfalls that you get when you're using hyperlinks. So, but the flip side is that you're going to have Google's going to have a much easier time crawling your site as a result of implementing your pages this way. So, like everything, you get a lot of benefit out of it. There are some trade-offs, one of which is you've actually got to set this up in your database in order to make it work correctly. And the other one, of course, is the postback issue. But other than that, you get SEO out of it. You get probably even greater control over the styling of it, because these are just actual hyperlinks. There's no ASP.NET shenanigans going on. So it's a clean hyperlink usually. So that is the Hyperlink Pager, and that is new to 4.5. So if you haven't upgraded, we're at 4.6 now, and so obviously that will have it in it as well. So just upgrade to the latest version, and you should be good to go. Looks like we have just reached our time limit, and if there are any other questions, then just let us know. You can post on the event page, and of course we will be back. Let's see, when will we be back? Next month. That is going to be October. Just playing with my computer here. October 23rd. October 23rd is the fourth Thursday of October. So we will see you then at 11 a.m. Pacific and at 2 p.m. Eastern, and whatever other time you happen to be at, whatever other time zone you're in. Again, thanks for joining us, and we will see you later. Be sure to stop by DNNDev.com if you want to check out XMod Pro or ask any questions on our forums or answers page there. And we're here for you. Be sure to let us know if you have any topics that you would like to see discussed in future XMod Pro user group meetings, or if you want to present. We would love to have you. That's it. Thanks a lot.